This is the Dallas Morning News.
The presenting sponsor for the Intersections podcast is Lynn, Pinker, Hurst, and Schwegman. Built on a culture of winning, these trial lawyers have proven experience, elite preparation, and relentless focus in the areas of commercial, intellectual property, and employment litigation. Visit Lynn LLP to learn more. And thank you so much to the Lynn, Pinker, Hurst, and Schwegman Group for all you're doing to support the Intersections podcast. This episode is brought to you in partnership by Clay Cooley Automotive, family-owned, family-operated automotive company serving the local DFW Metroplex for over 22 years. Clay, thank you for all you're doing to make Intersections possible. Headquartered in Dallas, Texas, Arcus Golf is a premier owner and operator of nearly 90 private, resort, and daily fee courses in the U.S., including Cowboys Golf Club, the world's first and only NFL-themed golf club, and 8 other courses right here in the DFW Metroplex. Arcus is an innovative industry leader providing unrivaled lifestyle amenities that complement exceptional golf offerings. To learn more, visit arcusgolf.com, and thank you to the Arcus team for all that you do to make Intersections happen.
Kyle, a little bit different. This is a two-parter. We haven't done this. Coming up now is a conversation with Ambassador Robert Jordan, former ambassador to Saudi Arabia, but even more than that, someone that lived in the Middle East, understands the Middle East, and with all the issues today in the Middle East, and especially the war that's broken out in Iran, it is a fascinating conversation just talking about that war, where the United States stands, where the other countries in the Middle East stand, where Iran stands, where issues of China and Russia, all those sorts of things mixed in of where this all goes.
Yeah. We went as far as we could go. We talked about the blockade that's currently going on. We talked about kind of the Iranian response, any potential negotiations, any potential, further peace deal that we're looking at with Iran. I think it's a depth and a breadth with someone who is an expert in the field and someone who had on-the-ground knowledge of the Middle East.
Interesting conversation, and one that there's something to be taken out of it for everybody.
Yeah, tune in.
Ambassador, the Middle East is still a hotbed for a lot of different reasons. It's on the front pages. We've now engaged in a war. But the Middle East is a very different place than when you were there and led our national interests in it. Let's talk now about Saudi Arabia today, where it stands, its role in the world, but then we'll pivot in to talk about the Iranian war and how that plays not only in the Middle East, but long term. And maybe the way to start that is to ask you, how is the Middle East different today than it was during that time when you were ambassador in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, I think when I was in Saudi, the United States was the undisputed world hegemon. But since then, that hegemonic dominance has eroded, partly intentionally, and in many ways the capabilities and activity of particularly the Gulf Arab states has increased. Their view of their independence has increased. I think their oil wealth has increased. And so they have a greater ambition now and less of a sense of total dependence on the United States. This has become evident from time to time when some of their expectations about the United States have not been realized, even though those expectations may have been unrealistic. As I said earlier, they expected Bush to somehow tame Ariel Sharon to deliver a peaceful Middle East. They were angry and disappointed when Bush didn't do that. But I think thanks to Bush's leadership and very good personal relations, he was able to keep things cobbled together. We are seeing, particularly the Saudis and Emiratis, hedge their relationships now and relying more on contacts with China and Russia. You go into restaurants in Dubai, and you'll see menus in Russian, Chinese, Arabic, and English. The Chinese are all over the place and are doing a lot of business.
So is that good for the United States? Is it good for the Middle East? And is it good for the world?
I think within certain boundaries, it is good for all of the above. And I think it is a reflection on the interdependence of supply chains, economies, and wise decisions that are being made. I think certainly China is the Saudis' largest oil customer. And so you would expect them to have a certain deference to their best customer. Mm-hmm. The first trip that King Abdullah made when he became king, and I think King Salman when he became king, was to China. Right. Aramco sends many of their employees to China for training and language training and so forth. So I think it makes the world a little bit more interconnected. And I think that's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing that the Chinese hold a lot of American treasury bills. They have an interest in the economic success of America. And I think that if you, again, look at it from the perspective of, say, the Gulf Arab states, they have a right and maybe a wise decision to make in hedging those bets. American administrations, as we know, fluctuate wildly from one side of the spectrum to another. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of instability in these relationships now, as it can occur in a highly divided democracy, and so they have, I think, a continuing interest in diversifying those relationships, not to necessarily the exclusion of the United States, but just to add more depth to their capabilities and outcomes.
Talk about some of the erosion that you've seen just over multiple presidencies since you served. I mean, you used the word eroding hegemony. Like, where has that erosion really been seen on the American side? Was it so costly because of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars? Talk about those factors.
You can look at a lot of administrations. For example, apparently the Clinton administration had Osama bin Laden in their sights.
Tora Bora,
and backed off.
Mm-hmm.
President Obama declared a red line in Syria and backed off. President Biden called Saudi Arabia a pariah state, and then when he became elected, went begging for the Saudis to increase oil production so gas prices in the U.S.
And personal attacks on Mohammed bin Salman.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so you can also look at the Bush administration's execution of the invasion of Iraq, I think, caused many of the Gulf Arabs to lose confidence in our capacity for nation building. And I can recall going back one time to see King Abdullah, and I went and I said, Your Majesty, I want to thank you for not saying, I told you so. And he then proceeded to say, he told me so. And so you can look at the attacks on the Saudi oil fields in Abqaiq in 2019 when Trump was in his first term. No response by the United States, even though we're supposed to be providing a security umbrella. Likewise, invading Iran today without consultation with either the Gulf Arabs or any of our NATO allies. The roadmap that President Bush announced for resolving the Israeli-Palestinian crisis was leaked and made available to our European allies without any consultation with the Saudis. They remember these things. They notice these things, and they have long memories.
So how much have we damaged our position in the world, Ambassador?
I think it's greatly damaged right now. It can be rehabilitated with proper leadership in the future. I think a new regime, a new U.S. administration can come in and correct some of the results. It may not even be too late for the current administration if they can pull a few rabbits out of the hat. But right now, the reliability of the United States is, I think, in great question. We keep changing our story on why we're invading Iran, why we're launching these attacks. We have one story out of the Secretary of State, another story out of the Secretary of Defense or War, or whatever they call it, and another one out of the White House.
But it begs the old analogy that it takes years to build reputation and trust, and it takes moments to destroy it.
And I think that may be overstated. It depends on how you've destroyed the reputation and what your assets are. I think we still are the most powerful nation in the world, and we're a pretty good ally to have for all of our faults. And so I do think some of this is reparable. Yes, there will be questions that linger. We're going to have to demonstrate some good faith. We're going to have to demonstrate competence. I mean, it's kind of like blocking and tackling. We have to just get that blocking and tackling down.
Yeah, we're having a tough time at that now.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Saudi Arabia and talk about where it is today.
Yeah.
So clearly a major oil producer, has been and still is, but yet we're looking now and seeing how much energy goes through the straits, and that's being questioned in ways that it never has before. Japan has 90% of their energy that goes through the straits.
Correct.
South Korea, 70%. And you add the numbers on there.
Okay.
Is this going to cause the world to reassess where they're getting their energy needs and reduce the dependence on the Middle East and thereby undercut the economies of that area of the world?
I think that's a risk. I think they can counter the risk at least to some degree. For example, wisely, the Saudis built an oil pipeline from Abqaiq to the west coast at Yanbu. And that only transports, I think, somewhere around 7 million barrels a day.
Yeah, so really a fraction of what went through the straits.
Correct. The Emiratis have another pipeline that goes out through Fujairah. I think that's about 3 or 4 million a day. And so there's still not nearly the kind of exports they could achieve through either the Strait of Hormuz or the Bab el-Mandeb Strait up the Red Sea through the Suez Canal. But the Bab el-Mandeb is much more of a risk for non-Saudi shipping because of the Saudi pipeline. And they may well be building another pipeline. So I wouldn't predict their demise in any sense. But I do think there's going to have to be a recalibration. My hope is that we can reach some sort of international governance of the Strait of Hormuz that will reduce the risk and give the insurance companies and the shipping companies more confidence.
We talked position of the United States, lost trust there, that sort of thing. Saudi Arabia has a different way of doing things. We are coming off a situation where Khashoggi, a journalist, American ties, was killed. Our CIA has indicated that the royal family knew about it, if not engineered it. Talk a little bit. You know the players that are involved. You know MBS, the Crown Prince. You know the other players that are involved. When all of that came about, and repercussions are still today, how did you look at that? What were your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I don't know MBS. I probably shook his hand when he was a teenager going through his father's majlis in Riyadh, but we have not personally met. But I did know Jamal Khashoggi, and I considered him a friend. So October 2nd of 2018 is etched in my memory as the date he was killed. I've written about it. I've gone on TV about it, and I find it, even to this day, just a horrendous recollection of a massive crime. He was a progressive, thoughtful guy, but not a revolutionary. He never advocated bringing down the royal family. He advocated reforms that were actually doable reforms, some of which have already been undertaken. And so, in some ways, he was ahead of his time. But no one deserves what happened to him. And it's difficult to move on from something like that, but you have to do it. And I've finally reconciled in my own view, maintaining a close relationship with Saudi Arabia is still in the American national interest. And I also think that that MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, has learned some painful lessons from this. We have not seen the kind of reckless behavior that he exhibited in the first couple of years of his tenure. The war in Yemen was a failure, and it should never have been launched. But he learned something from that. I think he learned something from the anti-corruption extremes that we saw in the Ritz-Carlton roundup. And so I think we've, in many ways, seen the maturing of the Crown Prince in a very kind of encouraging way, actually.
As I mentioned, the CIA put responsibility on the royal family. You had some challenges with the CIA. I know when you were ambassador, the report came out on 9/11, and there were 23 pages key that were redacted that would not be shared with our U.S. ambassador to Saudi Arabia, and that was you. How do you look at that CIA report? And I guess, in essence, you think they did it?
The report had to do with whether Saudi government officials were involved in 9/11. And the 28 pages that had been redacted and that they wouldn't let me see. I said, why can't I see it? They said, well, you don't have a need to know. And I said, wait a minute, I'm the ambassador.
I'm negotiating.
I'll clean up the profanity, but I am the ambassador to Saudi Arabia, and I don't have a need to know something that might affect, American security and the execution of my job. Please. So I then sent a cable in saying, if you really want an ambassador to be here, you better send me those 28 pages. Otherwise, I may well be out of here. And this is one of the benefits, again, of being a non-career
politician
ambassador. You can threaten things like that.
They know where the next call is going.
Yeah. And so sure enough, this young guy shows up with a briefcase, I think with a handcuff on his wrist, and he takes me into this conference room and opens up his briefcase and shows me the 28 pages. Doesn't allow me to take notes or make any pictures, of course. I look at the 28 pages. He closes the notebook back up, and he goes back to Washington, or Langley, I guess. Since then, those 28 pages have been declassified. And so I can talk about it, but essentially they are FBI field notes. And FBI field notes are inherently speculative. They are A knows B, and B knows C. Therefore, is it possible that A knows C? And, so-and-so had a bank account, and Princess so-and-so, Prince Bandar's wife, deposited $2,000 in that account. Is this terrorist financing? Asking questions, many of which don't have answers, is exactly what those guys are supposed to be doing. But one reason they don't, put it in the front page of the New York Times is because it's total speculation.
But you put credence on the CIA report that put responsibility at the highest levels of the Saudi government for Khashoggi's death?
In this sense, it was, I think, with a high degree of confidence was the way they characterized it. The field notes aren't anywhere near that. They are minimal confidence. And so I think you can make a distinction between the two. Secondly, I think it's too broad to say the royal family knew about Khashoggi or knew about what was going to happen. I think certain limited people knew how some other members of that regime operated, and they were trying to discourage people like Khashoggi from speaking their mind. And so you can probably put some dots together, but there's still dots. But I think it's most likely that he either knew or encouraged an atmosphere where these people felt confident enough to pull it off.
Yeah.
It begs the question of human rights in a wider sense. And when you first got to Riyadh, you talked about lack of women's rights, lack of human rights, those sorts of things. What improvements, progress has been made? Clearly, the Crown Prince has moved west in terms of some of his views of especially women's rights, but perhaps other rights too. What kind of success have they made?
It's pretty striking success, I guess I would say. I was in Riyadh last June, and I was driving in a car from the airport to my hotel, and I see this black Mercedes pulling alongside of us, and I look down and it's a woman driving. I go to my hotel, and I see these. I go down to breakfast the next morning, and I see these guys in black T-shirts and shorts, ponytails and tattoos, clearly Americans. So I ended up in the elevator with one of them. I said, "What are you guys doing here?" And he said, "Oh, we're the crew for the WWE wrestling match that we're having tonight. We're setting up." And there is a feeling of almost euphoria among the general population, particularly in the cities, over this new sense of freedom. Women no longer have to be covered, even Muslim women. Some of them choose to be. When I went into passport control in Riyadh, there were women clerks there, but they were all covered as either they chose to or their boss wanted them to. But all of this still doesn't fully account for the fact that the jails are full of political dissidents, some of whom are even women who were advocating for the right to drive 20 years ago. And so I think it's fair to say that rather than these being rights that are conferred, these are privileges that are dispensed by the regime, particularly the Crown Prince, which could be retracted. And I don't think, however, that—
So they haven't really been internalized.
Yeah, do you think they'll become rights?
I think they have a great chance of becoming viewed as rights the more they insinuate themselves into the society. So, for example, right now, if he were to start saying women can no longer drive, I think there would be an uproar, and that would question his legitimacy. And so even though he's making it clear that he is in control, he has less need to do that now than he did when he first took over. Because at that time, he was the first lineal descendant to become Crown Prince. It had always been the brothers and half-brothers and the sons of King Abdulaziz. That King Salman then breached that tradition by making his own son the next Crown Prince. That young Crown Prince, who was around 30 at the time, could see probably a lack of acceptance by many of the tradition-bound uncles around the table. He started ruling with an iron hand. He had the Ritz-Carlton roundup. He accused many of his elders and relatives of corruption, shook them down for lots of money, and he may well have been right about the corruption. And I think there is still an attitude that, in the hindsight, particularly the man on the street thinks that was a great thing for him to have done, because there was an aura of corruption about many of the crown princes who would come in, not the crown princes, many of the princes who would come in and want a piece of your deal after you were putting something together. So,
do you think the Ritz Roundup has changed that corruption sentiment in Saudi Arabia?
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay,
that it has, and that there could be another Ritz Roundup if it doesn't succeed. So, and that's actually something that King Salman started. Even before MBS became Crown Prince, he was concerned about corruption himself.
Yeah, there's some movement then, but I look at the number of executions, things like that. That's up, and not just for violent crimes, for nonviolent crimes too. Where does that fit in? It's
a fine line that I think any ruler of a country like Saudi Arabia has to walk. He doesn't feel powerful enough to completely eradicate some of the vestiges of a feudal society. But he's got to pick and choose where he drops the hammer.
E.g. Wahhabi, et cetera?
There are still vestiges of that religious attitude. The Crown Prince has tried to recast the Wahhabi view as returning to tradition, which is a more moderate form of Islam, which is what he says the original Wahhabi intent was, and that had been corrupted and
radicalized,
mischaracterized
Misused
by some of the newer imams and religious figures, some of whom have now been fired, and others more moderate have replaced them.
Let's talk water. Water is one of the most basic inputs in daily life and one of the least examined. Most people don't know what's actually coming out of their tap. In cities across the country, including Dallas, municipal water can contain elements like chlorine, lead, PFAS, and nitrates. These are measurable compounds, and ongoing research continues to explore their potential impact on long-term health. They test water at the home level, explain the results clearly, and recommend solutions based on what's actually needed, whether that's reverse osmosis, whole home water filtration, or something more targeted. They take care of all of it. To learn more, visit dallaswaterdoctor.com/intersections and mention the Intersections podcast for $200 off any filtration solution. Again, that's dallaswater.com/intersections. Thank you to the Dallas Water Doctor team for everything you do to support the Intersections podcast.
You mentioned maintaining power, which is key for any government. But we looked at issues in Iran several months ago. We looked at Egypt. A lot of that was an economic concern, not just a political concern. Saudi Arabia has historically had an enormous problem with unemployment of young males. So in the 18 to 30 range, I know several years ago, it was well over 25% unemployment. Has that improved? Has that stabilized? Or is that a real concern for the royal family?
All of the above. It has improved, but it's still a real concern. And they've added women to the employment roles now. I think women, the women's employment rate is maybe over 20%, somewhere in the 20 to 30%, if I recall correctly.
Taking jobs from the young males?
Well, not necessarily. They're taking jobs that the young males never chose to take. So hotel clerks, there are female taxi drivers. There are different ways that they have entered the workforce. Also, the Saudis have been rigorous in finding industries that are job intensive rather than capital intensive. The oil business is very capital intensive, but doesn't create that many jobs. And so they're looking at a knowledge economy. This whole NEOM center on the West Coast is designed to create jobs. That has not been as successful as they would like so far.
We'll talk about their Vision 2030 and what they want to do with their economy.
When you say theirs, it's almost really MBS's.
Exactly.
It is MBS's. He has a lot riding on this, and their public investment fund has taken some hits as a consequence of some of the grandiose projects. And yes, the Live Golf Tour is another one where they may well be cutting back.
Right. But let's not walk through those. Let's take each one of those, because the Nome City was going to be 50 miles long and 1,000 feet, 100 stories high, et cetera, et cetera. MBS has really walked that back significantly, and it was difficult to say that that was either well thought out, given that it was a 2030 number, or any real success that they've had with it today. The walkbacks have been more significant than any achievements they've had. How does that hit him individually, and how does it hit the economy of Saudi Arabia?
It has bled the public investment funds' cash assets down substantially. They still have something like $900 billion assets under management, but the cash component of that is dwindling, which is why we're hearing things about the Live Golf Tour and others.
Well, I know in 2024 too, at a time when there are great returns, the PIF basically had no returns at all for all practical purposes.
They've cited 7%, but I think that's much below most sovereign wealth funds' rate of return.
Probably didn't pass accounting at SMU.
Yeah. So they are, I think, concerned. They are reshuffling management. But I think they are going forward with the idea of a Vision 2030, and it may be 2040 or 20 something else, but they have the pedal to the metal on moving the kingdom forward to wean it off of dependence on oil, to create a knowledge economy.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're hitting some headwinds now about data centers because they're realizing that putting data centers out in the middle of a 120-degree desert
Tough.
takes a lot of energy,
Yeah.
and also presents a military target that their rival Iran now might find attractive. So there are ways in which they're going to have to be rethinking some of this. And so it's fluid, but I think they still have a positive sense that good things are happening in the kingdom, but some of these wild sort of vanity projects are probably going to have to continue to be scaled back.
Mm-hmm.
Kyle mentioned the live golf.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to that? It seems, and again, the last couple of days, there are numerous rumors that funding is going to be pulled back by the Saudis, that they're going to refocus domestically, not on international efforts.
Yeah.
How do you look at that live and how well it was thought out from the Saudi standpoint?
Well, again, it was kind of a vanity project where I think they thought they would somehow end up merging with the PGA somewhere along the line. It was never – the math never worked to make it sustainable. And the product certainly has not played well on TV or even with attendance in the U.S. I'm told that in Australia and some other parts of the world –
Australia, South Africa, they've had good success.
It's been successful. And you and I both know my next-door neighbor is on that tour, and so we've followed that with some interest.
Yep.
But there are, I think, plenty of good reasons why it was the exit strategy, I guess I would say, was never very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And the financial foundation was based on a massive subsidy rather than market conditions, and that's just not viable in the long run. And they've got other issues too. They've got a tennis tour. They've got other sporting events, some of which have been very successful, but some of which are colossal failures.
Now, there were rumors that last week, middle of last week, before their tournament in Mexico City, that they had made the decision that they were going to pull funding immediately. And in the space of an hour, with conversations that came out of the White House, that was at least modified towards kind of end of the year type of things.
Yeah.
Any realism to that?
Well, again, I think it shows how unrealistic the entire setup was, and how it was simply failed to be grounded in actuarial, economic, math. The math just didn't work.
Interesting. The White House jumped in, though?
Well, some of the Trump golf courses have been beneficiaries of the tour, and it may well be that there's an interest right now, particularly given the Iran conflict, in not completely throwing the Saudis under the bus. I think they probably feel right now that their interests have been completely disregarded by this administration. They have been made a target of Iran. They have the UAE especially has suffered more attacks than Israel has. So,
and to their energy economy.
And these are our supposed allies. So I think there may well be some effort to try to protect the Saudis from bad public relations right now. But also just I think it's sort of characteristic of this president that he sees things in very personal terms. He sees how it might affect his prestige and his image, and doesn't want to be associated with something that is blowing up, at least very publicly.
So PIF doesn't have any cash. They're cash short, put in capital investments, Live, et cetera. A number of other pieces have gone the other way. And then they come over several months ago and say that they're going to invest $1 trillion, which is roughly the size of their economy.
Yeah.
$1 trillion. Is that fantasy?
Yes. I think it may have something to do with how you characterize that investment. There are things that they're already doing that they would probably get credit for against that number. I think there would be ways you value assets.
Creative accounting.
We all know the president has been very active over his career in valuing and declaring values on assets, and so there may be some creative accounting going on here as well.
Lessons learned.
But that was I viewed that as kind of aspirational, sort of hyper extending their aspirational goals, I guess I would say, in a spirit of kind of camaraderie. But I'm not sure anyone really thought that was a real number.
So I want to jump in on where you see the president's relationship with MBS. Abraham Accords, first administration, work done there, kind of, maybe. But then, today we're obviously in an ongoing operation with Iran. And to your point that you just made, many of the Saudi interests probably have been looked past. Where do you see the relationship today between the two heads of state of both countries?
I think it's probably somewhat troubled. It's a complex relationship, and my guess is it's not all one way or the other. But I would say that the Saudis probably have less interest today in joining the Abraham Accords than they previously did. Part of that, I think, is because of the conduct of Israel, both in Gaza and in Lebanon. And the Saudis are finding it more difficult, particularly given the general attitude of their own population toward Israel, to maybe pull the trigger on that right now. If they do, it's going to require a higher price. There are going to have to be some real F-35s attached to it, some nuclear guarantees, some AI guarantees that might have been less aggressive under prior circumstances.
Well, that pivots us to the war.
Yeah.
It's rumored within the last several days that MBS called up the president as the president was moving down a road towards ceasefires, settlement, et cetera, and said, you have to finish them off. We cannot leave this the way it is.
Yeah.
Did he do it? And what is the interest of Saudi Arabia going forward? Clearly have not been friends for a long period of time with Iran. Enormous issues with Saudi Arabia in Yemen, which is the Houthis, 30% of the population, plus or minus, and they've been representatives of the Iranian government, shall we say. Where does Saudi fall into all this Iranian war, and what do they need to get out of it?
Well, a couple of years ago, the Saudis signed a sort of a mutual recognition agreement that was brokered by the Chinese with Iran. And I think they had hoped that they could maintain an equilibrium there, which is not open hostilities, but kind of a live and let live situation. The surprise attack on Iran by Israel and the United States has kind of turned that upside down. And because of the way Iran has responded by attacks on Saudi oil and business centers, Emirati airports and civilian centers, tourist centers, I think the Saudis now realize that it was to their great detriment to have disrupted that equilibrium. They were not fearful of a nuclear Iran. A nuclear Iran was never going to affect them. They have had more concern about Iran's stockpile of medium-range missiles. And if Trump were to walk away from a conflict without resolving the missile issue, that would create enormous risk for the Saudis. We'd basically be leaving them out in the cold. So here we had a Strait of Hormuz that was actually operable before the attacks. We had a nuclear program that was decimated, maybe not obliterated as the president said, but certainly decimated in a way that even if it were reinvigorated, was not likely to be a threat to their neighbors. And you had missiles that were, in fairness, being reconstituted even after the attacks of last June. So the missile proliferation is really the main existential threat to the Saudis right now that's coming from Iran. And if Trump walks away from that without resolving it, then they are far worse off than they were before this whole Iran conflict started. They'll have a Strait of Hormuz that is a mess. They'll have a missile threat that is hard to counter and very expensive to counter. And they have a looming threat on the horizon that has been awakened, even though they have taken enormous blows. They've shown they can survive, which we didn't know ahead of this. Apparently, their predictions were that the regime would crumble instantaneously. And now we know that didn't happen, which means Iran wins just by surviving.
Would a nuclear Iran force or push Saudi Arabia to develop nuclear weapons?
It could well have a proliferating effect. Mm-hmm. And they, of course, have a defense pact with Pakistan, which has a nuclear weapon program, likely funded by the Saudis.
Ambassador, you lived in that part of the world. You represented our country's interests. You're an expert in the Middle East. Was it important for us to take action in Iran today, the United States?
No. I would call it not an imminent threat, but a gathering threat. And there's a huge distinction. An imminent threat, of course, requires immediate action. You could argue that the rapid reconstitution of their missile program after the attacks of last June created a greater sense of urgency than if they hadn't been doing it. But that's also something that could have been managed through more pinpoint attacks and less widespread damage to the infrastructure, and perhaps would not have invited the response on the Strait of Hormuz. So the price we're paying, all of us are paying in the world, for having tried to take out a gathering threat is probably disproportionate to the benefit of doing it now. There's an argument that, and I've heard this argument made, that even though it was not an imminent threat, intelligence was received that suggested that there was a window of opportunity to take out the supreme leader that in some ways trumped the hesitancy that we might have felt because of the other costs of an attack. So, for example, our Navy has probably war-gamed the seizure of the Strait of Hormuz, at least once a year. They know how to do that. They know exactly what to do, and they know the cost of having to go in and do that. But it's a tactic. It's not a strategy. If they hadn't decided that there's some sort of unique opportunity that they had to take advantage of, my guess is we might not have seen this kind of an attack, and they might have had a more measured approach. But somehow their intelligence gave them that thought, but it didn't take into consideration some of these costs that I've just recited.
Difficult to understand what that intelligence is from our standpoint. But some would argue that once a gathering threat becomes an imminent threat, it may be too difficult to deal with. And I think back to North Korea, where North Korea for a long period of time told Bill Clinton, we're your friends. We're going to be there. We'll cooperate and everything. And now all of a sudden, we all are dealing with a regime in North Korea with nuclear weapons that I think most people, including the Chinese, would say is destabilized. At some point, do we get to the point where that becomes such a threat, and Iran becomes that in a much more difficult part of the world, the Middle East, where if we wouldn't have taken action, by the time we could take action, it's too late because we can't do anything to North Korea today.
No, I think that's a legitimate argument, and actually one that I've thought a good bit about. And I do think that under certain circumstances, that is a legitimate reason for entering into a conflict. There are some distinctions, I think, from North Korea to compare with Iran. But what I would say is, if you look at the last 10 or 15 years, Iran has inflicted enormous damage and injury on American interests, American servicemen, American military positions. And even if this proliferating missile construction boom doesn't have the capacity to reach the American homeland, it certainly can reach American bases in the Middle East. And so in that sense as well, I think we have a national interest in preventing that. The question is, what techniques, what tools do you use at what time to minimize it? I think the attacks of last June were a good example of what we can do, and we may have to do it repeatedly, but that may be the price you pay for avoiding losing control of the Strait of Hormuz or perhaps the Bab el-Mandeb Strait.
So I want to talk through one thing militarily. By all accounts, the U.S. execution militarily, I'm not saying the strategy, but militarily, operations-wise, has been decently flawless.
Correct.
So now we sit with a closed strait, a blockaded strait. What's our off-ramp? Where does the president go? What are the options on his desk to say, hey, what's this peace deal, or how do we get out of this?
Well, the Strait of Hormuz is probably the most urgent issue to resolve. I think it's going to take a multinational, international consortium, if you will, of affected players, primarily the Gulf states and likely the Europeans who rely on goods passing through the strait, maybe even Japan and others, including China. You could set up something kind of like the Suez Canal Company that manages a choke point like this. People have been thinking this through for years. It's been very well known that is a choke point that has military asymmetrical value to it. So, but it's going to have to be internationalized. I don't think we're going to ever have a situation where it's an Ayatollah booth that is operated there. And so that the off-ramp, I think, is to gather the allies that you should have gathered at the beginning of this conflict to find a way to finance, share the cost. And as brutal as Trump's characterization of our European allies has been about this, and I don't fault them for not coming to America's aid after the attacks certainly were done without consultation with them. But at some point, the reality has to kick in that it is to Europe's advantage to have some kind of opening of the strait and a multinational governance board of some kind.
Do you think that's feasible? Is it realistic to make that happen?
I think so. I think we've got Suez that's managed okay. I think the Bab el-Mandeb has been managed okay. And it may be overdue that we should have had some kind of forethought to what can happen at a time when we could have resolved this peacefully, and at a time when Iran was perhaps less under the gun.
But I think back to 56 on the Suez Canal,
Yep.
and some would argue that was the downfall of the British Empire.
Yes, and I've heard that statement made, it led to the firing of Anthony Eden, and probably was a pivotal moment. But it was also an exercise in fantasy for them to think that they could take it over in the first place, and go essentially counter to what I'm talking about, which is finding a way to have the free flow of international commerce as opposed to constricting it and basically sneaking your way in through deception to take it over.
At the heart of what you're talking about is an agreement among the parties in that part of the world.
Or who use it.
In 2015, we had an agreement with Iran. We have since pulled out of it.
Yeah.
But by all indications, Iran didn't live up to those commitments. Can we ever trust Iran?
We can never trust Iran, I think. However, the more cooks you have in the kitchen, in this case, the safer you may be with regard to that. You'll have a great international body that will put enormous pressure on Iran and also have enough firepower to make it very difficult for them to upset the apple cart. But I'll go back to it's unclear to me that Iran failed to live up to their obligations under the JCPOA. Yeah. Most analysts, I think, will say that they actually accelerated their nuclear development and their missile development after we pulled out in 2018. And by the way, that agreement expired last year under its own terms. But it certainly doesn't change my answer to your question, can we trust Iran? No, the answer is not. We can't trust them, but we also have ways to monitor them.
And does this force Saudi, UAE, Qatar, et cetera, to kind of walk away from the United States as a security blanket and have them take we hear it here, the Middle East first type of view?
I think it's to their interest to have more interoperability among their armed forces, to train together, to use American know-how and training to help them in that regard so that they are a more formidable local force that doesn't have to rely on the United States day in and day out. We can sell them all of our good stuff, our hardware, and we can train them with our best training techniques. But I do think they need to find a way to cooperate with each other more than they have up to this point. In fact, I'm working with my students at SMU right now on a project that is designed to demonstrate that as a really serious goal that we should undertake.
Can we trust them?
My students?
Not your students, those Gulf nations.
Trust is a difficult term to use, I think, in international relations because each set of national interests can vary and also can change from time to time. I think we can trust the Saudis generally. Mm-hmm. We had a problem with the Saudis in the mid-1980s where our Congress refused to sell them intercontinental ballistic missiles, so they went to the Chinese and bought CSS-2s. So sometimes that trust has a rupture. Yep. I'm sure they trusted us from time to time, and we ruptured that trust as well. So,
but they bought a lot of F-35s from us.
F-15s. They haven't got the F-35s yet, but we have certainly kept supply lines open and production lines open in St. Louis and elsewhere, building F-15s for the Saudis for many, many years.
Are they negotiating the F-35s, though? They've
asked for F-35s, but that has to be approved by Congress, and that hasn't happened yet, as with the Emiratis. So I think we can trust the Gulf Arabs to act in their self-interest, and I think our interests tend to converge in this regard, that they need an interoperable force. They have squabbles among themselves that are not trivial in many cases, but they also have a need to have a more robust, more inclusive security architecture. Mm-hmm.
Is it in the interest of Saudi Arabia, UAE, et cetera, to have a regime change in Iran? You have pointed out often that it's not only differences in Islam, Shiite versus Sunni, but there's also a cultural, Persia versus Arab.
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that and where that's going to lead in an area that's got a lot of explosions taking place?
Yeah, I think most authorities would say that the cultural differences between Arabs and Persians in many ways is more pronounced than the Sunni-Shia split. For example, in the Iran-Iraq War of 1980, many Shiites in Iraq fought against Iran. They had Shiite battalions fighting, and maybe they were conscripts, and maybe they had to fight. But I think there is a sense of nationalism combined with the ethnic differences that makes a big difference. So regime change in Iran doesn't necessarily mean something adversarial to the Saudis. For example, Reza Pahlavi, the son of the departed Shah, in my view, has no real chance right now of becoming the head of any regime anytime soon, if ever. But the opposition to the existing regime is so fragmented and is so capable of basically launching into a civil war that I think we've got to be very careful about how we would approach any kind of regime change in the future. You've almost got to have some sort of armed cohort. For example, let's say 30% of the military decides to defect. That could create a critical mass that could be successful. But beyond that, I don't see that happening. And in any event, I think probably the Iranian people would turn out to be relatively they would be very happy to be rid of the current regime. And they would be very happy to have any support from America or the Gulf Arabs in creating a stable society. And I think it's in the interest of both the Gulf Arabs and Iran to eliminate this instability.
Did the U.S. just miss that? Clearly, it seems at least that the administration thought that there would be a rallying around the United States effort from the people in Tehran, throughout Iran, that they would rally and push for a regime change, e.g. an internal revolution. That hasn't happened for any number of reasons. Do we now run the risk of that flipping with the threats on bridges, power plants, et cetera, that touch people to the core, and that now they almost rally around the government against the United States?
Yeah, I was actually with some Iranian expatriates last night talking about this very issue. And I think there is a great risk, not merely that they might turn on the United States for having attacked this infrastructure, but the consequences of attacking the infrastructure would make it impossible for any new regime to have a viable economy in decades. So if you lose the ability to have an economy, then you definitely turn on whoever caused that to happen.
Right. Your
sense of nationalism is a rally around the flag kind of impulse, I think, at that point. So it's anything threatening the entire Persian civilization is just an absurd declaration, and it certainly doesn't work to the United States' interest.
That brings us to a lot of short-term. We've talked some long-term issues.
Yeah.
But let's talk short-term, and there's a danger because the people listening to this may be even 2 or 3 days off this conversation. There could be a lot of things to happen. But where it stands right now, the U.S. has actually taken the first Iranian vessel. They've boarded it, taken control of it. We have a president who says that if it's not met by Wednesday, which is another
Tuesday.
24 hours, that he will, as you said, obliterate the entire country. And we have an issue that it's viewed the Iranian oil infrastructure will overflow come another couple of days. And this is a cost of roughly $400 billion a day to Iran.
Right.
So we can talk about some of the long term, but Ambassador, bring us now to kind of the next couple of days, because it seems like it's going to be climactic.
Yeah, I think the The ceasefire expires at around 11 o'clock tonight, Dallas time. And Trump has said he doesn't intend to extend it.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is they will come forward with some sort of breakthrough that keeps people talking, and some form of ceasefire continues for a while. This is the way Iran does business. It's to their advantage to string it out.
Yeah.
They always string it out. We always seem to allow them to do so. And in some ways, it may be preferable to obliterating the country. The blockade that U.S. forces have imposed, I think, is useful. And yes, it's creating some friction points right now, which is its intent. One of the costs of doing that will be if we continue to enforce the blockade and basically take away Iran's entire source of revenue. There will be starvation in the streets in Tehran. We'll have news reports and videos of crying, starving babies.
The CNN effect.
And exactly. And that's something that I'm not sure Americans have a lot of stomach for.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps they shouldn't. So I think that, again, is one of those things you have to calibrate. But this is a regime that is completely oriented towards surviving things like this. They have no affection for their people. They don't care what happens to their people. They probably wouldn't mind having some horrific video shot around the country. So this, I think, is a cost that someone needs to be willing to bear if you're going to continue this blockade. I would have preferred to see the blockade about a month ago, before they had shut down the strait.
Yeah.
And I think we could have exacted a much better deal as a consequence of that, which might have been over by now.
And talk about who we think is in charge, too, because there was a report this morning that the IRGC leader is effectively taken over the military control and call it pushed out the president. Now, we also don't know about the condition of the Ayatollah's son. So I think there's a lot of who knows what. But talk to us about who's at play in these negotiations, especially going back to what was happening in Pakistan that led to the ceasefire. So give us some idea there.
I did an interview on Al Jazeera yesterday, and they asked me something similar to this. This is when Trump was saying he might go to Islamabad to negotiate. And my response was, who's he going to negotiate with? Is it going to be the Speaker of the Iranian Parliament, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Supreme Leader who may be in a coma, or the head of the IRGC? My guess is it's the IRGC that's really leading everything now. And
so what does that tell you, the IRGC?
It's the Revolutionary Guards have been essentially running the country all along anyway. And the Supreme Leader has been deferential to what they want. So while you have these so-called moderates speaking out, the Foreign Minister, the Speaker of Parliament, and so forth, these guys are not moderates in any way that we would recognize. They are simply packaging their declarations in a more moderate tone, but they are totally under the control of the Revolutionary Guards. And this is something that I think we've got to recognize.
That's a great point.
And it makes it harder to make a deal because you deal with the people at the table, and yet they announce that the strait is open, and then 2 hours later they announce, oh, sorry, no, it's not open. So this, by the way, explains one thing kind of interesting. Apparently the delegation to Islamabad is a huge delegation from Iran, which tells you how many cooks are in the kitchen. It tells you that it may be an encouraging thing that they have so many voices there, but
or
it's
that they don't trust each other.
And it's been reported that there's a lot of arguing among that delegation.
So where does this all go? What's your best guess on, given everything coming out of Washington, everything coming out of Tehran, all the issues in the Middle East? We've incensed our allies in NATO.
I think you've got to go back and look at how the national interest of each group or each actor is affected by this. And my guess is there's enough common interest in having a flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz that some, bastardized agreement and mechanism of some kind will be undertaken. The Iranian regime will survive. The missiles may have some sort of agreement on limitation on range and capacity or volume.
That's going to be tough for UAE, Saudi Arabia to accept because it's not very far away.
That's correct. No one's going to be happy with how this comes out. And there's going to be a risk that's attached to all of this. For example, we still don't know what to do about the 900 pounds of enriched uranium that are, 2,000 feet underground somewhere. I've been wondering if it's possible to have satellite and other surveillance of that location in a way that would detect any efforts to extricate it from the ground. My guess is the bombing has destroyed all means of access. So even if an American group tried to come in there and remove it, it's a suicide mission. There would be just no way to do it. But I would think the same would apply if the Iranians tried to remove it. We would have the capacity at any point to detect that. Mm-hmm. And there might be some agreement that could be reached, since it's not accessible anyway, to sterilize it or do something to at least neutralize the danger. So, as Richard Haas says, it can always get worse before it gets worse.
And I'm sure it will. Ambassador, I think over the course of the last hour or so, you have shown us not only the experience that you developed in that part of the world, but also your perceptive and insightful thoughts of understanding different cultures, different parts of the world, and how they all come together. We appreciate you being with us.
Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Again, today's episode is sponsored by Clay Cooley Automotive, a family-owned, family-operated automotive company serving the local DFW Metroplex for over 22 years.